The species alienation suffering that you're giving me by your choices is strong today. A lot of triggers. Going on more than 2 months, I've returned from Kitkatla, where I haven't even begun talking about how ridiculous it was there with everything I had to offer, and how I can't even blame it on one person who blocked it, on how I approach so many other people and nobody budges. They don't budge sometimes because they're being oppressed by their own people, and they don't want to go against their elites or their connected or their leaders, and you can't help them. So this video is going to turn into more examples of tipping points haven't been passed and how you can measure that yourselves for you to self-correct as a species. There's no such thing as humanism anymore. You got to believe in your potential to solve your own problems. You can't. But I got to say that filming these videos for me is therapeutic, because the way I feel right now, and it's another different way to explain species alienation, is I can't wait to die, but I'm not suicidal. Now, I would interview 12 psychiatrists, and they still wouldn't get it. They wouldn't have the schemas to understand this, that I can't wait to die, but I'm not anywhere near suicidal. I might have feelings of despair right now, but they'll wash away pretty quick, and they're definitely gone in the morning. And that's skill sets I have to be able to do this, and I've documented years ago how that was getting better and better. But again, my theory on HSD, which explains the mental illnesses of the norm, their inability to deviate from the norm, from domestication, from self-serving, egocentric behaviors that have nothing to do with forming healthy communities, is just... So again, in a way, I would appear to a psychiatrist to be mentally ill because I'm so different from the norm. But again, the way I am is measurably well. Like, my behaviors are the behaviors of a well person, not an unwell person. But as compared to the norm that is unwell in their choices, of course, anything that deviates from the norm is a mental illness. And of course, psychiatrists are the norm. They would also act in certain ways that is unwell. So anyways, one way to verify that we can't self-correct as a species anymore is to try, and you can measure this with not somebody you know or have a personal connection with, but with a stranger, let's say a public servant, and whether it's the top boss you try with, or somebody that really, even if they're not the top boss, they're in a position where they shouldn't have to say, oh, that's something you have to talk to the boss. They're already in a position where they could problem solve this stuff. And if they don't, you can say, well, what's the developmental disability of the norm here, including you? And again, when I say this, I'm not insulting people. I'm generalizing these concepts. I'm saying, well, this is solvable, and you're not providing me a reason for this. And I have to probe to see if there's a logic on how this norm got into, this momentum of unwell tradition. And it's still really, you got it, like, people are developmentally disabled to me, and it's the norm. And in a way, this is a mental illness. It's the mental illnesses that affect majorities. So testing this is test with somebody where you really share your story, and right and wrong is apparent. It's easy to figure out, and yet there's no deviation in trying desperately to tap into their conscience, their ability to reference community or reference others, and then to problem solve something very simple that their HSD prevents them. Is you can't even tap into. I'm surprised. Like, people say, "Oh, I know how you're feeling," but there's no way that they can actually reference the hardship somebody's going through because of their nonsense, and this is so easy to solve. So this community is going to lose me like every others, and I could be frustrated eventually at the end, and after the 3 months, where I'm not decided yet how I'll decide what the beginning of that 3 month period is or not. But I would say they didn't wise up. It is I have so much to offer, and I'm supposed to what? Write a letter of permission, or when to be a teacher that's better than the teachers, and then be forced to be in unions of teachers. Like, it doesn't make sense. You can't reference who you serve. Either it's learners, and we can't tap into your conscience to do the right thing. It's your path of least resistance to surviving your day, whether you get a paycheck out of it or not. And it's developmentally disabled, and it's cruel that you keep having kids and grandkids, and you kind of don't see this illness that you have where your decline is happening. So, of course, it's an evolutionary dead end here, like every other place, because it's populated by the Homo communia who suffer from HSD, which is measurably accelerating within one lifetime. It's the Anthropocene is getting worse. What's going on up here? But still, I can't find one thing to do to enjoy. Either a friendship, a romance, badminton, volleyball. It's a possibility, volleyball. I haven't tried it yet. Any karaoke, anything I might like. Finding my cat friend and having a good time with my cat friend. Can't get anything. And yet I'm volunteering hours and hours of things people want, but not really what they need. And some of these things I'd be putting my life at risk for you, the people with developmental disabilities, who I have to explain the concept of human rights, and I have to explain that I don't trust people to process human rights complaints because of their HSD. I would only trust an AI that is programmed properly with the Canadian Charter of Human Rights, without deviation, double check, make sure it's well done, and let the outcomes of that AI decide the outcome of a complaint. You can't trust people to do it. People will again refer to their unconscious norm on how to assess things. They won't even show signs of understanding the language of the Canadian Charter of Human Rights. I'm pretty sure that when we reach that point of me versus BC in human rights, with only one component to it, which will have a lot of examples over decades, but it's still just one component. I could do this. I was failed in education in multiple provinces. I was failed in medical, in political, public servant services. I'm failed in all these ways, and yet I wouldn't fail you, and you don't even want to give it a try. I'd have to do a letter of permission, where really is I should be asked by you for the letter of permission as a polymath to offer you 10% of my skill sets to work in a school or somewhere else, and still surpass the results I get with learners or patients or patrons. This is who you are as a species. It's very challenging living among you. That's not going to change. You're getting worse. Again, this is why I feel like, I can't wait to die. But there's no suicidal thoughts. There's no possibility of suicide at all. How do you process that? And psychiatrists would say, oh no, if you can't wait to die, you're suicidal. No, it's different. And I'd have to record this interview with them where I have to guide them to the right questions so they figure out how those two things can exist at once and be different. And they still wouldn't get it.